Rebecca. So we're continuing with the Hidden Lamp, stories from 25 centuries of awakened women. And as I mentioned yesterday, they're a collection of um, classic koans, stories that are almost more like folklore, and then even stories of contemporary women who have passed on. So the one today is Yasodhara's Path. And I was so surprised to hear this story. Just give you a little bit of preface. So this is a different version, kind of in a way, of our origin story, which is amazing to come across. So this is dated back to early Mahayana sutras, supposedly is where this story comes from. And it is a different version of the Buddha's home leaving. So the story I think we're probably all familiar with, that he was the son of a king, a leader, and that it was the prophecy at his birth was that he would either be a great teacher or a great statesman. And his dad, being a great statesman, wanted him to continue in his lineage. So as the legend goes, and I was remembering in the Three Pillars of Zen, the talks by Yasutani Roshi, at the very end of this story, he says, and this we believe to be historically true. So we weren't there, but as reported to us. So his father tried to protect him from anything that would cause him to have deep contemplation about life, including old age, sickness, and death. And then he saw a wandering mendicant and said, perhaps there is a way to understand this. Supposedly, this was a big shock to him to discover these things. And then he went over the wall. I think his cousin helped him to escape, cut off his hair, and then reputedly for 6 days, 6 years, an extended period of time, doing very strong grueling practices, including one uncooked grain of rice that he ate a day, so that his chest and his backbone met. And then he was so emaciated and weak that that he actually sort of fell into the stream, and a young woman came along, a milkmaid, and gave him some nourishment, and that was the birth of the middle way. I'm saying not indulgence, but not asceticism. So, and then went on to sit under the Bodhi tree again for 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years, and then had his awakening experience on the 7th morning when he saw the morning star. So that's kind of the story as I've always heard it. And this is just, it doesn't discount any of that, but it's another version. So it's Yasodhara's path. So this is the Buddha's wife. This is her path. The emphasis not so much on him in this story. And this is reputedly from the 6th century BCE in India. Yasodhara, and you're hearing me okay, Princeton? Jason? Okay, great. Yasodhara was Siddhartha Gautama's wife. In one of the less well-known stories about her life, Yasodhara, the glorious one, and Siddhartha had been married in many previous lifetimes. The night that Siddhartha left home, Yasodhara had 8 dreams that foretold his awakening, and so she allowed him to leave. They made love before he left, and their son, Rahula, was conceived. I think my impression has always been this was kind of like an arranged marriage, and no significance has really been placed on her at all. For the next 6 years, Yasudara remained pregnant with Rahula. So I saw the eyebrow go up. We're in the realm of mysticism now, right? Or who knows? Who knows what could have happened? But anybody who's been pregnant, 9 months is long enough. 6 years would be crazy. And although she did not leave home, she traveled the same spiritual path and experienced the same difficulties as her husband, Siddhartha. She gave birth to Rahula, who's called Moon God in this story. And the teacher, I'll say something about her in a minute. But in the Theravadan school, Rahula is, the translation is fetter, so an impediment. And in this story, he's named Moon God because she gave birth on the full moon night of the Buddha's enlightenment. She prophesied that Siddhartha had awakened and that he would return in 6 years. Later, she and her son Rahula both became part of the Buddhist Sangha. So the teacher who made the commentary on this, she is Byakuren Judith Rager, teaches in the Soto Zen tradition of Katagiri Roshi. She's the guiding teacher at Clouds and Water Zen Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. This book was put together in 2013, so we don't know for sure where people might be. Hopefully she's alive. But the first thing she says here, what a relief. I smiled as I read this newly excavated version of Buddha's home leaving found in the Sarvastivadin literature. I immediately felt a relaxation in my body, the release of a stress I didn't even know I was holding. And she goes on to say, and I have experienced this, and maybe some of you have as well, that it's a little bit of a tough story. I mean, it's the hero's journey, right? He goes over the wall, he goes through all these ordeals, and he has this feminine intervention that does help him. But he becomes the enlightened one and the awakened one. So it's very focused on this sort of hero's journey. And I've always felt like, well, this is all of our journey in a way. We encounter the things that we encounter that cause us to begin to question, what is this life about? Who am I? What is this suffering? How do I find a way to deal with the hard stuff in life? And there is the obvious aspect of renunciation, where he left home, he cut off his hair, he did not write postcards back. He was gone, and for an extended period of time. And so there's no talk of what resulted from him leaving, or who he left behind. It's so much focused on the hero's journey. And of course, we're extremely grateful that he made that journey as we understand it. All of this is kind of legend, because there was no recorded history except for oral history at the time. And that's why Ananda, all the initial sutras, thus I have heard, because he's the one who had the memory that he could remember exactly what the Buddha said. And then, much later began to be written down. So I just kind of wanted to bring forward a few things about this. One thing in the story, it says, she didn't leave home, but she had her own path. So she was not the home leaver, she was the home stayer. And minimally, she dealt with being a single pregnant person, maybe a single mom, and having the love of multiple lifetimes have gone. That must have been painful. But it also talks about her as basically she had these dreams she had this intuition, you need to go do this. This is your way. And she supported him. And one of the things I wanted to bring forward, this is actually probably the most important thing I wanted to bring forward, is that we, being here in Sesshin, we are doing something significant. And we feel, I feel, I won't speak for others, I feel I am doing something important. I feel like I am doing something meaningful. And I was remembering when we were sitting that I remember coming home from Sesshin and just blabbing on to my husband about all my insights. And meanwhile, he was watching 2 kids while I was gone. And I finally got it after a while. I don't need to be talking about my experience. Like, how was it? How did it go here? How'd you get dinner together? What are the kids up to? Like, being sensitive about what his experience was when I was gone. So I think that it's valuable. I propose that it's valuable for us to really give consideration to all those in our lives, gone now, whether it's this place, specific people, or just the opportunity that life has provided us to be here. And it doesn't happen by accident. It really doesn't. And there's so much that has to go into that being possible. And so my intention for Sesshin had been to be more permeable. And so I in the past have been very sort of, I guess, strict about not engaging with people outside when I'm in Sesshin. And right before we came to sit, my daughter called, and I know it's her because I have a ring that means it's crickets, and it means it's Annie. And she was calling because she is taking this foster kitten back to the animal shelter, and she knows it's the right thing to do, but she's pained about having to put Timmy back at the animal shelter. And it was that it's touching that she called me as a touchstone. She really knows what she needs to do, but she's kind of like, could you say something else that would make me feel I don't need to do this? And I'm like, I think you've thought it through, but it's up to her, But just that she wanted to make contact, to have that reassurance. And that's the way in which I was feeling like it was okay with me to be more permeable. And that how, my kids in particular, and everybody has different constellations in their lives, and they have been with me since I've been practicing. I was pregnant with my son at Summer Ongo the very first year we were there. So they have been part of my practice. They have been part of getting left behind many, many times. So to appreciate that for those who are supporting us in ways that we see and don't see. And it says she traveled the same spiritual path. That's kind of interesting, because she wasn't doing exactly the same practices he was doing, at least as far as we know. But she traveled the same spiritual path, I guess, of inquiry. Like, what is going on here? What is my life? Who am I? Why do we have suffering? And experience the same difficulties as her husband. And she prophesied that he would be awakened and return in 6 years. And then the thing about them becoming part of the Buddhist Sangha, I think we also know, did I mention it yesterday? I'm not sure. I think I did. Just that, initially, yeah, I did. The Buddha said, no, women can't ordain. It's going to be too complicated. And then got asked, and then finally relented. And there's another story in here about his aunt, who was actually, when his mom died, the person who nursed him, literally nursed him. And then he allowed her and 500 of her followers, according to this story, to be ordained as well. So I also think that there's an aspect of romantic love in here. There was lifetimes, repeatedly, that they had been together, and what kind of growth and transformation happens from that. You know, we don't talk about that a lot. And the great compassion and the word is even escaping me. Her ability to let him go, to say, you have to do what you need to do. And I have so much faith and love for you that I want to support that, with no guarantee of who's going to come back or not come back. It brings up a memory of my former husband went, after we had been practicing in Salt Lake City for about 3.5 years, he went to Europe to be with Genpo Merzel and travel for 3 months, going from session to session. And I remember him, because this is in the days when you could go in to where people got on the airplane. And I remember him going down the gangplank and watching him go and thinking, and we had been together for 3.5 years, thinking, I don't know if I'll ever see this guy again. And he was definitely the love of my life. So that kind of trust in the process and that kind of love for supporting somebody else's purpose is really just so commendable and amazing. And Yasudara is not an old person. You know, we talked about so many of the classic koan stories. It's basically a crone. It's an older woman who is helping a monk have some kind of realization. This is a person who's probably in their mid-20s, maybe, and a young mother, and also part of the commentary from the teacher is the practice of staying, the practice of home life, the practice of really, and she talks about after 40 years of practice, the practice of leaving home at home, the practice of I don't even want to say non-attachment, because it's not. It just allowing things to be as they are, working with stuff as it arises, not holding on to our ideas about ourselves and our identities. And that practice of home leaving my little box of who I think I am, doing that at home. And we can all do that, wherever, however our home is, and whoever is or is not there. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to share that she would say. Yeah, she says, this is the teacher who did the commentary. I have had to work with my egocentricity, my attachments and clinging, and my greed, anger, and delusion right in the middle of the mess of a household and in urban Zendo. After 40 years of practice, I'm still practicing home leaving within the boundaries of home, as Yasudara did. She also says, I think most of us can relate to this, in the West, Buddhist practice is often a combination of monastic visits and householder lives. That's kind of what my life is. Monastic visits and householder life. And has been for many years. This is a provocative thought. I'm not saying it's my thought, I'm saying it's her thought. The idea that Dharma practice requires the renunciation of attachment of ordinary life, family, and work seems to come out of the privileged and one-sided point of view of the all-male founding fathers of Buddhism. It seems that in renouncing the world, the early Buddhists made women the so-called enemies of practice by making them the symbol of the form world. Our lure was considered dangerous to monks. Women with our blood, birth, noisy children, families, earthly bodies, life, love, and sexuality were what needed to be renounced. And she says, can this hold up in the evolution of 21st century Buddhism? That's her question to us. And this is just beautiful. Out of love and for the sake of the liberation of all beings, she let Siddhartha go. For the sake of the liberation of all beings. And that's what the people in our lives do. They let us go. Sometimes at their own inconvenience, and I don't know about suffering, but loneliness, or certainly not getting the help that if we were there. And it could be anything. I mean, it could be the fish in my pond who aren't getting flakes for the last 2 weeks because I was afraid somebody else might overfeed them. So I think, in summary, I just feel like it's really an invitation to appreciate all the support in our lives, and that even when we feel like we are doing this monumental, important thing, we're not doing it alone. And we couldn't possibly. I was recalling in Seisen's book, or the compilation of talks, which Choa is instrumental in putting together. There's so many talks about relationship, that we're never not in relationship to the world, even when we live a solo hermit-like life. You know, we don't survive without being in relationship to the world. And it's really, especially when we get a little too self-important, that I'm doing this really, refined thing. Yes, and it is with complete connection to the rest of the world. And we're very lucky to get to do it. So, this is the moment in Sesshin to say, keep on going. We tend to be sort of like the racehorses for the gate, thinking about Sunday midday, and all this effort, all this juice, all this energy, let's not let it go to waste, and keep putting ourselves in 110%, and for all the other beings, from the love of all the other beings, for us to be here. Whether we know what they are or not, all the bodhisattvas and Buddhas and the whole lineage. I was really moved seeing the Kechin-Yakus out on the table, and the lineage charts. And yeah, there's a lot who came before us that enable us to be right here, right now, as us.